know something interesting is sure to happen. Well, I think you ought to tell me who you are first. Mr. Rabbit? Then why did you ask the question?
Goodness, this is quite extraordinary.
Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?
But today is turning into the most curious adventure I have ever had.
Welcome to the Alice in Wonderland podcast. I'm Georgia Ellis, and thank you for taking another tumble down yet another rabbit hole with me. And today we're going to tumble down, I don't know which rabbit hole, but we're going down a rabbit hole with Dane. So Doug's life started with abuse and has turned into abundance. Now he's on a mission to show others how they can do the same. In 2001, he went public with his life story, and since then, he's been on an incredible ride. Doug has appeared on Canadian national television, and his story is featured in best-selling books. He is a successful entrepreneur, author, mentor, father, and keynote speaker. Doug believes it shouldn't be so hard to get the answers you want, and becoming successful shouldn't be so difficult. His story and experiences covers a lot of ground, and he made it his mission to figure out how to break free from the emotional prison he was in so he could guide others to do the same. Doug is the International Sales Director for Bob Proctor and the Proctor Gallagher Institute. He's spent the past 6 years working alongside Bob, leading the division of success coaches and consultants globally. Bob affectionately refers to Doug as the stuck buster because he has seen how Doug has a natural ability to help people become unstuck and lead a fulfilled life. Welcome, Doug. Let's get curious.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So good to have you on board. Now, I know I've been wanting to have a chat with you and go down some rabbit holes with you for quite some time now, and I'm glad that the stars have aligned and we're here and we're doing this. Because I'm just going to let people know, we actually met, I think it was 2014 in Canada. And both of us were there doing some training with Bob because we have worked in different roles in his organization. So me as a consultant and you as leading the consultants. And so we've sort of been in touch over the years, but then our lives got busy and I've been wanting to jump on board and really dive down into some of the gold that you have within you and your own journey. So before we get into that, before we see where we go on today's discussion, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests.
Okay.
So Doug, I want you to imagine that I'm 7-year-old Alice from Alice in Wonderland. And I'm walking my way through Wonderland and I come across you. And you're doing your thing, whatever your thing is. And I say, hey, Doug, what are you doing? Why are you in Wonderland? What's your purpose? Why are you here? How would you answer what you're doing in this lifetime to a 7-year-old girl? How would you describe your passion and your purpose?
I would probably say, I went down the rabbit hole many, many times in my life and I kept getting stuck. And so I decided to come back one more time to lead people out so they don't get stuck or stay stuck. That's what I would say.
Yeah, beautiful. So all around helping people become unstuck. Now, I read out in your bio that, Bob affectionately calls you the stuck buster. And I actually can remember you showing me the poster I think it was in your kitchen at the time of Bob had this amazing picture done up for you with, the stuck buster.
Yeah.
But I think the journey begins not with Bob giving you that label. It's about you becoming unstuck yourself.
Definitely.
Can you share a little bit about your own journey of becoming, loosening the glue that held you back to potentially a life that you didn't want? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, wow. I mean, the story of mine goes in so many directions and touches so many areas. I guess I would say that, like people often ask me, like when my story was, in the news and such, I went public, people go, how did you get to where you are from where you came from? Because statistically people often say, I either should be homeless, I should be dead, or I should be in jail. And so I think, I just think I had this pull on me to search for answers. I remember when I was young, something wasn't adding up. I always felt like something was off track. I got into a lot of trouble. It was a very difficult time, but for some reason, something was off. And I had a sense of that. And so I kept trying to figure it out. Now, the problem was, looking back later, discovering that I was spending so much time trying to figure out what was wrong, that I got convinced there was something wrong with me. And there was never anything wrong with me. There was just, I went through some wrong things that caused me to think the wrong way about myself. So I think, we're creating God's image, and I just had a sense that there was more to this and to me than what was appearing or what I was experiencing. I guess that's probably how I'd answer it.
Mm. So we have listeners all over the world that tune into this podcast, and some of them may not be aware of your story.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to share a little bit about that so people can get a little bit of context around, because you've just mentioned there, I should have either ended up in jail, dead, or whatever it might be. So why, what's the story behind that? What is it why should you have ended up like that, but you haven't?
I did end up in jail actually for a couple of nights at one point when I was younger, but
big tick there for Doug, been in jail.
I got it. I went in and I got out. Well, it's just, I'll give you the kind of the Coles Notes version. So I usually start in the middle. So I was 40 years old, 39, 40 years old, and my second marriage had failed. I'd walked away from it, like all relationships of mine. I don't know, walking away from them, because I really didn't ever think or believe that, somebody would want to be with a guy like me. And if they really knew me, they're probably going to leave anyway. So I'd always leave. Anyway, so I left my second marriage and I ended up in counseling, separation counseling. And the lady I ended up working with was, a really brilliant, beautiful person. And they're doing the background questions and family history questions. And I think it was the second or third meeting. She goes, I think there was some abuse in your background. I said, no, there was no abuse in my background. She said, no, I think it's probably worth exploring. I said, all right, whatever you want. I remember that I grew up in an alcoholic family. I remember, had some recollections of some of the things my parents, but I blocked most of it out. Anyway, and she was brilliant. She, I was in business, so she set me on a bit of a business plan. She said, listen, what you need to do, if you want to stop yourself from making the mistakes you've been making all your life, and you don't want to end up in this place again, it's probably a good idea to figure out what's been causing you to do what you do. And so if you go back and put your story together, you'll understand why you're at where you're at and what you need to do going forward. And that made a lot of sense to me in business. I learned through my mistakes and failures. So I put this story together. I went back to my childhood neighborhood. I interviewed parents, teachers. I knew I was adopted at a young age, so I got my adoption records. That led me to what's called Family and Children's Services, and I got those records. And in those records, there was mentions of police officers visiting the home. So I went then to the police station and got police records. I hired a private investigator, and I started to piece this whole story together. And so what came out that I blocked out my entire life, I ended up going public in the newspaper with. I was a 6-month-old baby. I was given up for adoption as an infant, placed in foster care. And then 6 months later, I get adopted, and I land in this violent alcoholic family. My parents were both brutal, violent alcoholics. Their family and parents were violent alcoholics. And so I get dropped in this family. And so for the first, 11, 12 years of my life, I'm witnessing, extreme violence. My dad beating my mom beating my dad having, numerous affairs. He'd bring his girlfriends to the house. My parents, my mom beating on me and my brother. And we witnessed some pretty violent stuff. And my parents split. I actually threw my mom out of the house. The police came and they took her away. She never came back. And then I started looking for, the love and validation that I should have got as a young child that I didn't get. And so I go looking for it, and I'm hanging around at this stereo shop, and I meet a man, and ultimately end up getting hooked in with a ring of pedophiles. And so my friend and I, Dane, we ended up being sexually abused over a period of 2 years by a ring of pedophiles. And then that ended my kidnapping at 15, 13 rather. And then from there, it was drugs and alcohol. And my dad was a pretty broken man, and he wasn't really, in control of me. And I'm running the streets and skipping school and doing drugs and alcohol. So then I was stoned and drunk till I was about 23. Got into business. Grew up in a very poor family. Got into business. Left a factory job and started a couple of businesses. Went bankrupt at 25. Just trying to figure it out, And then from 25 on, I met Bob Proctor. I didn't really meet him. I went to a weekend event of his, and that was a turning point for me in terms of earning money. And so I just, 25 through 40, I was, always wanting to be in relationships, had a big heart, sensitive, kind, loving, but I was terrible in relationships. I just, I would destroy them. I would I was dishonest. I couldn't be open, because if I opened up and was honest with you about what I was thinking and feeling, like, you would have left for sure. That's what I believed in. And I just had this distorted view of myself. And I suffered from depression, anxiety. I just, I was nervous around people. But I had this great facade going. I looked like I was doing well. I looked like a happy guy. I was making money. So financially I was successful. And I just really was faking it for the longest time. All the time feeling really crappy about it. Like it just didn't feel right. But that was my way of surviving. And now, after going public in 2001, so many years later, here I am, and ended up working with Bob when you and I met. I'm at a point now in my life where I just I often say to people, they go, "How are you doing?" I say, "You know what? I am doing the best I've ever been in my life." They go, "Why is that?" I said, "Well, a couple things. One is I'm very open. I'm very honest. The truth shall make you free. I don't hold any secrets, and I'm an open book. And the more I've told my story, and the more truthful I've been, and the more open I am, the freer I become." And then the other thing is, I made a decision a while back that I was not going to concern myself with what other people think of me. And so I'm the farthest away I've ever been from worrying about what people think. And the farther I get, the better that I feel. And so now I don't have any ill feelings towards my family, my parents, the men that abused me. In fact, I went looking for the guy that abused me primarily, hired a private eye to try to meet him, because I wanted to know his story and like what happened to him that would cause him to do what he did to me. And so now, even whenever I hear stories of abuse or trauma, the first place I go to is the victim, or not the victim, sort of the abuser. And I wonder what the deal is with them that would cause them to do that. So yeah, I'm free of all of it. And the more I told the truth, the freer I became. So I'm in a great spot.
Yeah, and you can tell, there's a real calmness in the way that you're explaining your story. It's almost like it happened, but I'm so far removed from it and moved on from it.
Mm-hmm.
One sort of little thing piqued my interest. You mentioned, I'm just curious about this. You mentioned that, you went to the counselor And she said to go and, sort of research your history. I think you've been abused. Had you actually forgotten about the kidnapping? Had that been totally wiped? Or was that something that you sort of knew on the peripheral because, you went back and you found all these things about adoption and everything. So was that totally wiped out from your memory as well?
No, that specifically wasn't. So I would have these recollections and memories. And over the years in my relationships, I remember where I would share some of the stories I remembered with, my relationship, because I was kind of testing to see, all right, let's see how she reacts to this. Let's see if she still stays. Let's see if she still likes me. So I do remember that, but I had a perception problem. Like when this started to come out originally, my counselor said, like Doug, you were abused. I go, well, it's not really abuse, And she said, let me ask you a question. She said, let's pretend you have a 10-year-old son and you find out that men have been, doing the things that the men were doing to you. How would you feel? And then the light bulb went off. I go, holy crap, And then the kidnapping, it was a trip that we got tricked into taking. In my mind, it was just a trip. But it was, they were charged with kidnapping. So I had a perception problem, and I wrote off all the things that happened to me, and I minimized them, which to some degree served me. But on the other hand, what it did is it minimized my self-worth. And so that was a real turning point, a real eye opener. So yeah, there are memories, but many of them, I did not have any memory at all. I got them from police records and interviews from other people, and just filled in the blanks. And then, people often ask me now, when I'm working with people, they go, should I go back and dig up my story? And I love when you talk about the rabbit's hole, because one of the chapters in my book is called The Rabbit's Hole. And they said, well, you can go down the rabbit hole if you want. I said, I don't think you need to. I now believe, and I've proved it to myself, that anything you need for your past that needs to come up in your memory or to teach you a lesson, it'll come up when it needs to come up. And if you just strengthen you and you strengthen your mind and you really understand who and what you are, when that does come up, you'll be fine with it. So I've had all kinds of things come up, and I kind of just not laugh at them, but I just kind of smile and go, huh, that's interesting. And it doesn't really bother me,
Yeah. I want to hone in on something you said there around your I'm going to call it perceptual defense. So you had created a story in your mind as what sounds like a coping mechanism to just, oh, this is okay. This has happened. These were potentially men giving me some attention that I'd never got. This is good. And I'm getting whatever. So you're creating this story to then now later on in life, it takes somebody to look at it from a different point of view and tell you that maybe there was some abuse. And you're going, no abuse. It was fun. But really, not that you're saying those words, it was fun, but, really starting to see how we do that. So one of the things that I mentioned in your bio is you help people become unstuck. Is that perceptual defense common with people? It's almost like a denial that something needs to change, I guess. Do you find that comes up?
Yeah. Well, definitely. I mean, I love the words that you use, because what I do to get people unstuck is I get them to change their perception on their story. And so, I had some unhealthy perceptions about my story and about me. And so it really is essential. And I said something one time to, a lady that had asked me for some help. And she said, Doug, that one statement was a turning point for me. And what I said to her, I said, listen, this didn't happen because of you. It just simply happened to you. And so one of the rules I adopted from, a book that a lot of people read, it's called The 4 Agreements. And one of the agreements I agreed to live by was I don't take anything personally. So I just made my mind up. I wasn't going to take the abuse personally. It wasn't about me. It just simply happened to me. And I guess I was lucky I was adopted, because I could have been dropped into any family. I could have been dropped into a wealthy family. I could have been dropped into a poor family like I was. I mean, I just happened to be dropped into that family, and that's nothing to do with me, you know? So, you know, you need to change your, well, you don't need to, but it'd be a good idea to consider changing your perception on your story. And if you do that, it's a very fast way to let go.
So what are some of the things, because I'm loving where you're going here, because we do get tied up into the stories that we tell ourselves, and we then start to label and take things personally. How do you help people start to differentiate between this is me and I'm this is the reason it's happening because of me, as opposed to this is me and there's an outside force, like for you, an outside force put you into that house. How do you help people move away from that? Because that can be really hard to do.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I'm just thinking about a lady I spoke to from Australia about a month ago. She was on my show, and she got referred by a friend, and he said, you got to talk to Doug. And so I spoke to her, and she came on the call, and she said, you know, like, I've tried everything. I've done hypnotherapy, I've done counseling, I've done that. She listed all these things that she's done. And I said, well, let me just ask you a few questions. And so I just asked her a few questions to really kind of get a sense of, you know, who she really was. And so the questions go beyond the story. I just get people to sort of share what's on their heart, not what's in their ego and, you know, their stories and stuff. And so I'm talking to her, and so she told me what, and I said, tell me the story. So I always share my story, that warms them up. And she had heard my story on another call. And so we just started talking. I said, well, let me ask you a couple of questions. So I just changed her perception on the story. I said, here's how I'm seeing it. And man, you should have seen her, George. She just lit up on the call. And she was oh my God, she was like, that's it. I just changed her perception of the story. And I said, do you know how long we've been on the phone? She goes, no, how long? I go, we've been on for 15 minutes. In fact, I just got a couple Instagram video messages from her. She goes, it's shocking still to her. She's doing so well. And so the point of that story is that, you know, the typical ways we approach this stuff, the way our healthcare systems are set up, the way the social systems are set up, just our current paradigm around these issues is to go down a certain path. And so I don't really think most people need counseling and therapy. Okay. Now, some people do. I did, I suppose, obviously at the time. But the problem is that what I learned is that if you keep going backwards and looking backwards and talking about the past, that's where you stay. And that's how self-image works. Very people understand how self-image works. Even the people that are, you know, counselors and therapists, they don't even get it. And what I learned is that the way your self-image operates is if you look backwards and you replay events and experiences using your memory and your imagination, you see yourself as that person because it happened. And so you continue to see yourself as that person and you stay as that person. And so I just get people to look forward and go like, you know, what would you like to be doing? And get them thinking about their future. And every time they bring up their past, I go, no, let's go back. Let's go to the future. Let's move. Let's go that way. And then when they do that, they start to light up and they get excited. And then the real authentic self shows up, right? Because their heart is talking, it's their desires talking. And I don't listen to your paradigms, I don't listen to your self-image. And when your ego or your false self, or what I call the enemy, is yapping away, I don't listen. I'll cut you off. I go, George, and I'll just interrupt you because I don't want to talk to that person. I want to talk to the real you.
Yeah, and that's such a beautiful gift. And while you've been talking, I've been thinking of there's a lot of work around what you're discussing there, and there's a lot of really beautiful frameworks around it as well. So Chris Agiris did the Ladder of Influence, which is exactly what you're talking about, how we create from our perceived reality, we take on information, and that information then starts to create our assumptions and our conclusions and our beliefs. And you and I both know that then forms an identity in our subconscious mind. And then that then informs our reality.
Mhm.
And one of the things that's really powerful about that ladder of influence is it gives you clues on how to guide either yourself or other people down from that enemy that's speaking down to that true inner self. And
Mhm.
then how to also support somebody who is building that identity around the future, around who they want to become. And
Mhm.
without you, I don't know if you're aware of Chris's work, but you're describing it beautifully. And the way that he encourages people to bring people down from their beliefs is to ask questions. And you do that through curiosity. And that's what you've been doing with people.
Mhm.
And we can do it to ourselves, is when there's something happening, what assumption have I made here? What conclusion have I come to? And what belief have I hung that assumption and conclusion on? That,
Mhm.
and does it serve me? Like, we just keep asking questions to bring us back down to our
Yeah.
truth, our, our,
Yeah.
our our beautiful self.
Yeah. I love what you said there. We can ask those questions ourselves.
Yeah.
Have you heard of cognitive processing therapy?
Yep.
I'd never heard of it. Somebody sent me a podcast literally a couple days after I talked to this lady in Australia. And for those of you who don't know what it is, really simply, basically, it's a 10-week process. And the podcast I heard, this was a writer, an author, and a reporter, and she'd suffered sexual assault when she was 13, and I think she was at 1340 at 1340 at the stage, and she was suffering from PTSD and been through all kinds of therapies, et cetera, still struggling. And so she heard about this. She found one of the pioneers in this field. She flew to Seattle, said, "I want to do this in 10 days." And so she did a crash course. So there's basically 10 weeks, and you do 10 exercises. And the whole idea basically is, to basically negate the need for therapy. And all you do is you have these worksheets and you answer some questions about your perception of the experience and the story and the trauma. So a couple of things that she had taken on. She had said, she had walked down this alley in New York City every day on the way to school. There was always a young man there, and she waved to him, and he'd wave, and they'd smile. And so she locked into the belief that if I hadn't waved to him and I hadn't smiled, he wouldn't have assaulted me. And so the question is, well, is it possible that he could have assaulted you even if you never ever said hello? Yeah. And then she was also locked in the idea, she was wearing loose men's boxer shorts and a tank top. And she was locked into the perception that the reason that he assaulted her was because it was easy for him to get his hands inside her pants. And so the question was, well, the therapist said, well, is it possible that if you were wearing jeans or anything else, he could have done it? Because he did have you at knife point, did he not? Yeah. And so the questions just changed her perception. And within the 10 days, it was a huge shift for her, And so I heard this a couple of days after I talked late, and that's all that I did. And that's all that you need to do. Anybody can do it. Just ask yourself some questions about your perception. You don't need, it's not complicated. What I learned, Georgia, is that this took me way too long. It was way too hard, and I made it way too complicated.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking, it doesn't have to be so difficult. It doesn't have to take as long.
I love the question that the therapist that you're explaining there was asking, or the person that was guiding this woman that flew to Seattle, is it possible? Just that simple question, is it possible that, and if we can have that in our repertoire of our own consciousness, when something happens and we're starting to think that we're the bad person or we're not good enough, is it possible that I've got this the wrong way? Is it possible that I'm viewing this from a way that doesn't serve me? Is it possible that, and even in an argument, like, can you imagine having that running through your mind if you're having an argument with someone? Is it possible that I'm misunderstanding them right now?
Right. Yeah.
Is it possible that they're seeing something from a different point of view than me? Is it possible that I don't have enough information? That's just, is it possible? Three words. I think that's just gold.
I'll give another question. This is so about a year after you and I met, I was going through what I called the Eeyore period. Hi, it's me. I was really struggling.
Sorry, can you do that again? That was just gold.
Hi, It's me. So I would go into Starbucks every day. And there was a guy there named Pete, and he, like, everybody knew Pete because Pete was always at Starbucks working. And so I'd sit down and go, "Hey, Doug, how you doing?" "Hi, Pete, I'm fine." And he was a wonderful guy, and he'd listen and he'd talk, and he was a Christian. And so he was, espousing, scripture and different things. And he was a great listener. We talk. And one day I said, there's a question you ask me a lot. He smiles. He goes, "What's that?" I said, "Well, I notice you always ask me the question, is that really true?" He just kind of winks. He said, "Yeah, Doug," he said, "you'll say something and it's just your emotions talking. And so I just go, is that really true?" And then your emotions will go on and on again. And I'll say, "Is that really true?" And then, sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 times, but then you go, "Well, maybe it's not true." And he said, "Your emotions are like an elephant." He said, "Left untamed, an elephant can trample a village and kill people and do all kinds of damage." He said, "That same elephant can be tamed by a stick. You can tie a baby elephant up to a stake and a rope that it can't pull out of the ground, and it grows into a very powerful elephant that could rip that out of the ground and, again, cause all kinds of damage." He goes, "Do you want to trample everything, or you want to control it with a stick?" And he said, "Make your mind up. You're not going to let your emotions rule your thinking." And so I started the practice, go, is that really true? So whenever I get stuck and I make shit up, I go, is that really true? And usually it's not.
I love that you say that, because, our brains are fascinating. They're pattern recognizing and making machines. So if you get some information and there's bits missing, the brain will go, "Oh, where in the background in the files can I find something that sort of fits there?"
Yep.
And it'll plug something in and create this story that is not true whatsoever. And someone could say something to you, and all of a sudden you're missing a piece of information. Brain puts it in and you label somebody something, and it's not even true.
Right.
So, we got these amazing machines in there, but I think that one question, is this true? And if you keep asking it, you go, maybe it's not.
Yeah.
I know that I work with people that, a common thing is, "Oh, it's the industry that I'm in. The industry I'm in at the moment, it's really suffering right now." And I go, is that true? Is everyone in your industry suffering right now?
Right.
No. And this was actually quite interesting during the pandemic, when we had a lot of industries were hit, yet you'd find little sparks of inspiration of people just pivoting and doing things differently, because they weren't buying into the external economy. Second, they were being creative, but they were also not allowing what was happening outside of them to dictate them, and they were creating their own truth. But then other people were just, "Oh, this is happening around me and it's going to happen to me as well, so I'm just going to resign to that."
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. If I look at the people that I've worked with, or people you work with, the ones that pivot quickly and don't get stuck are the ones that really understand. You mentioned the word machine. So the other thing I discovered was that I have this machine. I'm not a machine, but I have a machine. I'm just quoting the author, Maxwell Maltz. And I'm the operator. And I discovered some things about the machine that I wasn't aware of. So as I mentioned earlier, I understood that it's my self-image that's controlling my thinking. And so I need to create a better self-image. But I also discovered that the machine only works and reacts and responds in the present moment. It's like a GPS, right? Your GPS in your car cannot predict what's going to happen or what you should do of an accident that has not happened yet 10 miles down the road. But if you run into a roadblock and you make a turn or there's a closure, it'll automatically recalculate the route. And so I learned to live my life in 24-hour blocks. And the idea is that I understood the machine only works in the present moment if I'm focused on the present moment. And so when I had to train myself, it took a little while, but I just kept going, no, I don't look backwards and I'm only moving forwards. I live my life in 24-hour blocks. And so I would practice it. Like right now, I could think of something about tomorrow. And when it comes up, I go, do I need to deal with that now? No, I could deal with that at 11 o'clock tomorrow. I defer everything until I have to deal with it. And so that's proper use of this machine. And so I think if we got these machines, it'd be prudent that we understand how to friggin' operate it. And that's the decision I made. And that got rid of my anxiety. That got rid of all kinds of fear, doubt. I calmed down. Oh my God. I calmed down because my palms would sweat, my skin broke, like I was a mess. And because I just wasn't operating properly.
I love that. And I love that understanding of how we operate, because that, I'm going to use your term, that machine, or maybe it was my turn. I don't know. Yeah. That part of us, every single part of us serves a purpose, and it serves a really good purpose when you know how it operates. So thinking about that self-image piece around how it works in the present moment, it's, when you peel it all back, it's actually a safety mechanism, just like a GPS. It's going to keep you safe. It's going to divert you from things that are outside or that are unknown. And that's a really good thing. However, it can also, on the flip side of that, be really detrimental if you have deeper beliefs that aren't aligned to where you want to go. That machine's going to keep you in that safety net of the known. So if you don't know this, and if you don't know how to recalibrate that machine, that safety mechanism, it's going to keep you stuck. And Doug, you know how to get unstuck, right?
I knew how to get stuck first.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's really fascinating that we have these marvelous vehicles that we operate out of, being our bodies. And so few of us really understand how to get the most out of it. And it's not just the mind, it's the heart, it's the mind, it's the brain, it's everything. Every part plays this amazing piece of the role. It's like if you get into your car, it's not just the fuel and it's not just the engine, it's everything about it. So same thing with us. I think we need to go a bit deeper in some of that.
Yeah.
So couple of things that have been coming up, and I love where this is going, especially around the perception piece. And one of the things that you mentioned is that, you know, you don't need to go back to move forward. You know, you don't need to go back and find the cause. However, part of your story was you did go back. Did you find that just having a few little signposts are helpful to help you move forward? Does that give you, or did that give you some form of grounding and acknowledgement and validation of, oh, that's it. It's not me. Now I can move forward. How does that work?
Yeah, definitely. You know, but I've got a slightly different perspective now. So through that book, The Four Agreements, if you're watching or listening, you don't know the book, The Four Agreements is Don Miguel Ruiz. You got to get the book. It's just a little book. And fundamentally, the idea was that, you know, when you were little, you were programmed by your parents. You were hypnotized for the first 6 years, and they just drilled in rules, values, beliefs, what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. He called it your domestication. And he said you were domesticated like a dog. If you were good, you got rewarded. If you were bad, you got punished. And very quickly, you took over that domestication and you auto-domesticated yourself, and you took over punishing yourself if you weren't following the agreements. And you very rarely praised yourself if you did well. And so as I study that and move through things, I've realized that pretty much everybody, high percentage of the population, suffer from what I call a mistaken identity. It's a case of mistaken identity, and you're stuck in an emotional prison because of it. And so you're locked in to a belief about yourself. You have rules, values, all the stuff that was handed to you. And you could come from the best family ever. Your parents could be amazing people, great family, good marriage, all that stuff. But they weren't you. You were programmed, but it wasn't your programming, it was theirs. And so you end up, early on, you start feeling it early on, you go, something's just off track here. You don't know what the right track is, but something feels off track. But you have no authority or power, and so you carry on. And then, that's early on. And then 15, 16, teenagers, you start fighting back. And the parents go, oh, these kids today. And what's happening is the kid, the true authentic self, is going, wait a minute, no. And it tries to rise up and stand up, and it gets pushed down again. And so then this just becomes the norm, and we just live our life that way. And so you've got this mistaken identity that you've been living with for so long, and you believe that it's true. So yes, I think it can be good to go backwards if it helps you kind of gain understanding. But if you could just consent to the idea that, yeah, I got this mistaken identity and it doesn't feel right. And so we also get locked in this idea, and this happened to me, is when we don't feel good physically, we think there's something wrong. And I know you, and I know many people, I know me, I kept going, what the hell's wrong with me? Because I didn't feel good. What the hell's wrong with me? And I kept asking for years, and I never got an answer because there's nothing wrong with me. But I felt like there was something wrong because this programming just didn't line up with me, and I felt off. For me, I was really off. For others, it's, slight and moderate. So yeah, you can put the pieces together, but I say just go inside and ask yourself, what do I really want? Like, what am I passionate about? What do I really want to do? And then just create your own identity, program yourself with your own rules, values, beliefs, your own personal credo. This is the way that I'm going to live, and let go. And you can do that. I had a client do that. She was working with me, and when I first started talking to her, she couldn't earn a lot of money. And I knew right away why she couldn't, because, she came from an Eastern European family. You got to work hard, and then you got to put everything, like, she had all these beliefs about money. And I said, you got a money problem. She went to me, I said, well, you have the wrong attitude towards money, and whatever your parents told you about money, they were wrong. She goes, Doug, I remember when I got this job. So she just gotten a job. She was in financial services. And that's when I met her. She goes, I was so excited I got the job with this company. I went home, drove to my parents' place, like, oh, Mom, Dad, I got this amazing position, and I'm going to make a ton of money. And you know what my dad said to me? My dad said, we didn't raise you that way. And I said to her, Tara, why don't you go home and tell your father how he should have raised you? And we can do that. We can raise ourselves up starting right now. Now you got to remember the old identity. It's strong. You've been living with them for a long time. But you can create a new one. So you can go backwards, but that'll take you too long.
Yeah. I think sometimes, yeah, and I agree. I think, I guess it also depends on the individual, and, there's no right or wrong. And it might be a case of finding out what works for you, for the person. But what I'm experiencing with the people that I work with is most of the time, there's no need to go back. It's about looking forward and creating that identity. And moving forward and aligning yourself to that. Just to share stories like you, I've had clients, and the main thing we work on with people is creating that identity that's already aligned to their goal, so that when they're moving forward, they're in alignment with where they want to go, and it helps to undo some of that programming. And that programming is stored in neural networks in the brain. It's stored in cells in your body. It's stored everywhere. So being able to recreate that and to move forward with the new identity is really liberating and really empowering. And I love the story there too about the person you're working with who had these, belief systems around money and what money is for. Create your own belief systems around money.
Yeah, totally. The real pandemic that I discovered is judgment. I was sitting with a friend of mine who was mentoring me, and he's a Christian man as well. And one thing was really missing for me. I figured out, I always felt like something was missing in me. There was something was missing in me. And I discovered what was missing me is I didn't have a relationship with God. And I'm not talking about religion, but God was in me, but I wasn't connected to it. Anyway, I'm talking to this friend of mine, John, and we're chatting, and we're just talking about, he's talking about scripture in the Bible. And I go, shit, I just figured it out. He goes, what's that? I said, well, judgment goes right back to the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were judged. They didn't listen to God. And then, they figured out they were naked and they covered themselves up because they were worried about what God was going to think. And so we're just so locked into this judgment problem. We were raised with it. Our parents criticized their friends. They criticized each other. They criticized the neighbors. They criticized us. And so we learned to judge, and we learn to judge ourselves. And in that book, he calls it the judge. And so we judge ourselves. And that's the biggest problem. I found if you tell your story, like I do calls, and what I try to do is get people to tell their story. Because if I say talking works. If you tell your story, you will become free because you'll realize, like, I'm not going to judge you. And so they go, you're just so accepting and non-judgmental. And people have told me some pretty dark things. And I just realized it's not their fault. Mm. And so if you can just open up and get your story out of you in any form, whether it's therapy, whether it's a friend, whether it's go public like I did, but the more you tell the truth about who you really are and what you really think and how you really feel without fear of judgment, you'll release it. And then what you do is you're also freeing other people because they're worried about what you think about them. You know, and so I'm on this judgment project. I just keep trying to get people just to speak up.
Yeah.
And just say what's on your heart and your mind, and you'll realize that you don't have anything to worry about. And then the load just gets lighter. But that judgment, that fear of criticism, that's a heavy thing to carry around. Yeah. And I carried around, a long time. I'm 56 now, really up until around 49.
That's around the time it's a big burden to carry, isn't it, for all those years? And I think, do you believe that potentially there's an element of shame that goes along with that judgment as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole underpinning problem is that you and we say you should be ashamed, Doug. Like when our parents told us, you should be ashamed, and we did something wrong. You should be ashamed. I figured out why people can't form habits. When we were little and our parents were trying to get us to form habits and follow the rules, they didn't praise us when we didn't figure it out. They just punished us, And so we try to form new habits. We try to get things going. We try to start doing new things, and we drop the ball and we fail or we miss a day, and then we give ourselves a hard time. And we've just been brought up with this idea of being ashamed if we don't follow the rules. But here's the bugger of it. Bob said to me one day, he said, Doug, most of the rules you're living by are man-made. He said, there's some God-made rules, and then there's man-made rules. So your job is to figure out what the God-made ones are and what the man-made ones are, and just follow the God-made rules, and then make up your own rules as you go. That was good advice.
Very good advice. So there's a few things that have been bubbling up now that I don't know how many rabbit holes we're going to get down, but I might just start with where you finished off right now, and that is around the God-made rules and the man-made rules. So what God-made rules have you discovered since Bob gave you that challenge? Mm-hmm. What are some of the rules that you actually not negotiable live by rules that are universal God-made rules?
Yeah, well, the first rule that I live by is, and I had to make the author of that book, you have to make these agreements. So the first thing I agreed with is that, yes, I was created in God's image. And if I look at God as my father, I'm a father. And I've practiced for a long, long time. She's almost 18. I really practiced just looking upon her with just good. I try not to judge her. I try not to give her any rules or values. I just let her figure it out. My job is to find out who she is and help her become that. And so my father wouldn't judge me. God wouldn't judge me. I am forgiven. I didn't know what the hell the Old Testament was and the New Testament, and that the New Testament was this covenant that, all is forgiven. Jesus shows up and, gives his life and we're all forgiven. I didn't understand that. But when I heard go, yeah. And so I don't live in the past, and I've forgiven myself. There are laws of nature So God created the universe. The universe operates in absolute precision and by certain laws. And so I decided to figure out what those laws were. And I just made my mind up. I wasn't going to break the law anymore. I broke the law a lot when I was a kid. And I thought, I'm going to just follow the laws. There's laws that we can see that falls down, not up. But, there's these primary laws that govern everything. And so, one law I don't break is what's called the law of relativity. I keep practicing not comparing myself to other people, because what that says is that I'm inferior to, say, you. Well, if I'm inferior to you, that must mean by law that I'm superior to somebody else. And that's not true. And so I picked up on these laws and thought, you know what, I'm going to stick to the laws of nature, and then realize most of the other laws are made up by other people. And the interesting thing is the laws keep changing. The man-made laws keep changing, And so again, that question, is that really true? Or what was your question?
Is it possible?
Is it possible? Yeah, is it possible that? And we need to think, we don't think, we're like sheeple, we just follow along.
I know. I think that's this is my personal opinion here. I think that one of the greatest things, the gifts that we can give to our fellow humans, is the ability to learn how to discern, how to think for ourselves, to claim our agency and our sovereignty back, instead of conforming to what's going on around us, to actually sit back, go up to a higher perspective and ask some of those questions. Is it possible that those people over there that are fighting for the white side, whatever white represents, they got some validity in what they're saying? And maybe those people over there that are on the green side, maybe they've got some good points there. We're in between that, to bring ourselves up and practice discernment. I think if we can learn how to think properly, and you and I both know this, that we think thousands and thousands and thousands of thoughts a day, but they're just on repeat from the day before. Where can you start to question and get curious and ask those questions? Is it possible? Is it true? And there's another question we can ask ourselves too. Does this serve me?
Yeah, definitely.
And
the other thing to realize too is, we all are absolutely unique. There's nobody like us. We're unique individuals created in God's image, but we're all one. Everything is made up, and we're all one. Now, I didn't get that. I heard that. I go, yeah, we're all one. Well, I didn't really believe it, because I didn't really understand it. But I discovered, you know what? We are all one. And for me, it comes down to, it's either love or fear. That's it. And so I just choose love. I remember seeing a movie. It was first kind of movie I'd seen about the crucifixion and Jesus' life, and it was called The Son of God. It was on Netflix. The actor was amazing to play Jesus. And at the end, I'm weeping as Jesus, is killed. And at the end, I felt like I lost my brother, And I wrote down in my book, I said, I'm going to just practice acting like Jesus and loving like Jesus. Now, do I do it all the time? No, but I just keep trying to remind myself, just come from a place of love. Because anybody that's coming from a place of fear, they're just lost, they're confused, they're ignorant, they're angry, they're hurt, they're sad, but they just need love. And that's a choice. You can operate from that perspective, or you can operate from a place of ignorance and a place of fear. And that's not working really well for us. It's getting us in a lot of trouble.
I love the idea there, and the invitation to come from a place of the Christ consciousness. So, which is, coming from a place of love. And I know many years ago, it's probably over 20 years ago now, I was actually reading the book Conversations with God. It was one of the books that I read as part of my transformation. Yeah. And I don't even know where in the book it was, but I remember, and I'd journaled about it, about my question. We've got lots of questions for our listeners today. The question I would ask myself whenever I was in the presence of another person and they might have been pissing me off a little bit or rubbing me up the wrong way, the little mantra that I had would be, what would love do now?
Beautiful.
And that still plays out in my head whenever there's something that I'm feeling a little uncertain or uncomfortable at a person. I go, what would love do?
Yeah.
And love would be, what would adopting a Christ consciousness or something like that, or a Buddha consciousness, what would that do? And that would allow me to love, like someone's just cut me off in traffic, instead of getting angry, which I don't anymore. I haven't for a very long time. If someone does that, what would love do? Love would go, oh, maybe they're in a rush. Maybe they didn't see me. Maybe they're having a hard day. Maybe they're just an idiot driver. Who cares? What would love do?
Right.
Right.
Love it.
Love would just allow them to get on with their day. I wouldn't honk the horn because, we all make mistakes. I'm not perfect. So,
You know what's so good about that? Just real quick, it's like back to your other question: is it possible? If we ask ourselves good questions and repoint our mind to a good question, by law there has to be a good answer. And so that's a beautiful question. What would love do? And if you propose the question, your mind's going to deliver you an answer, and that's the path you're now going down. I love that.
And I love what you've just said there too, is I think most of our, and I'm saying this collectively and generalizing here, our inability to act sovereignty in a sovereign way and to claim our agency and to discern is we're not asking powerful questions of ourselves in that moment. And that's a skill. That's a real Jedi skill, to be able to be in a moment and in that split second practice that metacognition of noticing the thought before it comes out your mouth and changing it in that split second.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ninja, Jedi, comes with practice.
Yeah, comes with practice. I love it.
Absolutely. And so there'll be moments when someone will cut you off in traffic and you'll go straight to that horn because that's the old program. But the more that you reflect on that, and the more you go, okay, next time I'm going to ask myself, what would love do?
Right.
You start to build that new identity, and that I'm going to call it Christ consciousness, because I think that's a beautiful thing for us to think about approaching the world, around looking and being really curious around everything that's going on around us, especially about ourselves. There was one thing that piqued my interest that you said a little earlier when you mentioned that you had a good friend. I think you mentioned his name was John, and you said he was also a Christian. And one of the things you felt that was missing within you felt something was missing, was this connection to God. Then immediately after that, you said, but I'm not religious, or you said something along those lines. So can you help me understand how you've filled that missing gap, to fill that void that you felt there was a disconnection between you and whatever people want to call it, universe, creator, God? How did that come about? What's it mean for you now?
Well, it was a, like for everybody, it's a journey. It was a friend of mine. He was actually a client, and he was Christian, and I didn't know that much about him, but we got to know each other. And as he was working with me and really understanding, the machine and mindset and thinking, because where he came from, he came from a place where he was brought up to believe a lot of things through religion that just weren't true. And when he sort of came to the end, he goes, "Man, oh man, Doug," he said, "This was so good." And he did some really incredible things. He still is. He said, he said, you really understand the mindset piece. Like, you really get it. He said, if you could combine what I know about God with what you know about mindset, man, oh man, you could do a lot of good. And you know what? When he said that, I wept. Something hit me. I go, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. Now, when we first met, we'd be in a restaurant for breakfast, and, we would talk. And at the end, he goes, "Can I pray for you?" And go, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And so he would pray out loud. I was so uncomfortable. And anyway, he just kind of started pointing me. He said, "Why don't you develop this relationship with God?" I go, "I don't know what the hell you're talking about. How can I have a relationship with somebody that I don't even know or can see?" And but he just pointed me in different directions. I started reading. I have a great little book. I still read it every day, called Jesus Calling. It's a little devotional book, a little one-day devotional, and it's basically Jesus, talking to you, inviting you to talk to him, and hang out with him. Don't start your day yet. Just stay with me for a little while. And so I started doing that, and then I went to some churches, and I read the Bible a little bit, and but I didn't get into religion. And he said, Jay said, lucky for you, Doug. He said, you're like a little infant in this because you have no religious experience at all. He said, so you're a clean slate. He said, you could just really understand having this relationship with God. And if you choose to get into religion and choose religion, that's fine. And so I just started pursuing this relationship, and I just started talking to God, and like I couldn't even say this a couple of years ago. Like if people said, do you believe in God? I go, well, like I sidestepped the question. I felt so uncomfortable, And so I just started having these conversations. In fact, I was just driving home before this call, and something, that I've been working on that happened last weekend. I just got this rush and tears came to my eyes, and something I know I'm supposed to do it. And I knew God was talking to me. And then, some things happened. I was in a coffee shop, probably one of the most prominent ones. I was in a coffee shop, and I'm having coffee with a friend, and this woman comes up and she goes, I'm sorry to interrupt you. She goes, you're going to think this is really weird, but I was over there at the counter and I saw you, and God told me to write you a note. She goes, I know that sounds bizarre. I don't want anything from you. I'm just supposed to give you this note, and that's it. So she hands me this note, and I read it, and I pass it to my friend. She goes, what do you think? I go, well, it's unbelievable, because one of the things that's in this note is something I've been saying to God. And I got this note from God, and then the woman leaves, and it was on just a simple, I don't know, notepad. That was it. She hands it and she's gone. And I told a friend of mine, a couple of years later, she goes, you got a letter I didn't get a letter from God. You got a letter from God, And so these things started to happen. And I just started talking and listening and paying attention. And sure enough, I developed this relationship. And so we talk all the time. And I don't know what else to tell you.
No, I've got a question for you, and hopefully you're okay to answer this, because I'm sure my listeners are going, what the hell was on the note?
Yeah.
So, are you able to share what, what that confirmation was?
Yeah.
It might be something that doesn't mean anything to us, but I'm sure there's some people going, I want to know what's on the note.
Well, let me tell you another story that sort of, so another thing happened prior to the note. I'm just pulling up my phone here. I got a picture of it. I was doing a guided meditation. Some clients of mine do these guided meditations, and they wanted to do it at one of my client seminars. I said, well, I better go through it first and see what this is all about. And I'm thinking, like, guided meditation. All right, these girls are a little bit loopy, right? Anyway, so sure enough, I get into this meditation and I go somewhere, and I come back and they go, so, where did you go? I said, I can't tell you. And they go, you can't tell us, or you won't tell us? I said, no, I'm not telling you. They said, can you write it? I go, yeah. And you ever see the movie Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey? You know how the film ends? She's on the beach, the Pensacola beach, and this sinewy figure walks down. It looks like an alien. It turns out to be her father. And what I believed was that was God, because the movie is all about science versus theology. And so I am there on the beach. God walks down the beach, and he says, I'll still weep if I say this. He goes, Doug, I'm going to hand you the keys to change the world with your voice and your words. And so that's what I couldn't tell you that. So I wrote it down, and I'm weeping. I'm going, oh my God, like God's talking to me. Anyway, so here's the note. It goes, I feel like I hear the Lord saying, I've called you by name. Don't worry. I've laid out a path before you, and I'll give you the strength, everything you need to walk it. Don't doubt you are who I say you are. You do hear my voice, and you're doing exactly what I called you to do. My love is a river flowing out of you. You are a blessing to many. I will supply all you need. You have many stories to tell. I will tell them through you. Don't worry. Don't doubt. I am. And the words that I've been saying is, supply all you need. You have many stories to tell. And I kept thinking, I kept getting that message that, I got stories to tell. And so I'm reading this and go, oh my God. So that's what's on the note.
Yeah, beautiful. So question for you. in relation to that. So I know that a lot of the work that that Bob teaches, and you're working for the Proctor Gallagher Institute, is around setting yourself a goal and something to move towards. However, you've just been given a note to almost sit back in a way and go with the flow, surrender to what God has laid out for you. How do you reconcile that, like surrendering to what you may feel now is a calling, to setting a definite purpose, burning desire, goal? Is there a reconciliation? Are they one? How do you tussle between those?
I think the note from God was, talking to me in relation to my desires. So I think we have these built-in desires of things that we want to do, or what we're really passionate about. And I think that's where you go like, what am I passionate about? And what gifts do I have? And if you look there, that will then create a picture for you of what you want your life to look like. And goals are just simply, benchmarks that are leading you to fulfill the vision for your life and fill your purpose. And your purpose, quite simply, is, what are you passionate about? That's it. That's all purpose is. What are you passionate about? And so I think what you do is you pull out these desires, and you start moving towards them. And then I think what God does is just, points you down a different path, or has you hit a roadblock or a failure to get you to, look in a different direction. The way I look at it is, and I didn't know this was true. This is true though. Creation is already finished. And everything is already created. We're just moving into it. And so it's like you're walking through a forest, you're going down a path. And I think I'll go down that path. I'm trying to get to the other side I'm going to go down that path. I go down and go, I went down the wrong path. And so I back up and I go down another path. And so I think God just keeps, nudging me and redirecting me and repointing me down the right path. So, God's given us free will. It's our choice to do what we want to do and live the way we want to live. And God is behind you 100%. Like, God just simply wants to express himself through you in the physical world. And so he's on your side. Religion might say the opposite, but he's absolutely on your side. And he wants you to live the way you want to live and do what you want to do. And he'll just make sure that, he'll help you stay on track. Same with the universe. The universe, it's everything's laid out. They just keep, pointing in the right direction. So I feel that I keep conversations with God going. You mentioned the book. And I think I get in trouble. I make mistakes. I have wins. I get these rushes. I get these notes. And I think that's just God's way of just, like, he's got a plan for me. He's got a plan for all of us. But you can get a sense of where you're supposed to go, and then let God take care of the plan.
So God's almost like you're in a pinball machine and God's the flippers and you're the ball, and you've got this free will. You're going to go everywhere. And every time you're sort of getting close to going in down the ditch, the flipper comes along, goes, no, over here, try that for a little bit. See if that helps you out. So the pinball game of life.
Yeah, that's good.
Beautiful. Hey, one thing I just wanted to touch on that just dropped in for me while you were talking there around, finding your purpose, and your purpose being your passion. I have a mentor. His name's Jamie Wheel, and he uses this analogy, which I absolutely love and adore, because I felt it for myself in certain times when I was going off track. So I may have been, I know what feels right for me and what I want to do and I feel called to do. And he uses the analogy of Thor's hammer. So you know how Thor has this hammer and he's the only person that can lift that hammer, and it's to him, he can pick it up and it's light and he can wield it anywhere and it comes back to him. Right. But then anyone else tries to pick it up, they can't budge it. They can't move it. So I realized that during some part of my journey, I'd go over and try and pick up someone else's hammer because it looked good. It looked shiny and that looked nice. I'm going to give that a go. And I'd go over and try and do it. And it was so hard. Like, it took so much energy to try and do what this outside force or this shiny object was attracting me to. And so I think for all of us to think about what are you passionate about? It should be light. You should be able to pick that up. And not everyone will be able to pick up and do the things you do because it's not their hammer. Mm-hmm. So Doug, you're sharing with us, you've got these amazing stories that you tell, and you tell them really well, and they've got meaning and depth to them. That's a beautiful hammer for you. You're picking it up. It's quite easy to tell your truth and speak in your truth. So I think for the people listening is think about what it is that you're passionate about, but are you also potentially being enticed into picking up a hammer that just doesn't belong to you, and it's hard work and it's heavy.
Mm-hmm. You're picking up for the wrong reasons because you think you should.
Yes. I should do this because mum and dad wanted me to be a lawyer. I should do this because my friends are all doing this.
Stop shitting on yourself.
Yes, exactly. So as we round out, I've really loved this discussion. I'm sure there was other little nuggets that I sort of hung on to but haven't delved down into, but I'm conscious for our listeners, we're heading into past the hour now. So I'm sure that some of them are going, come on, I'm sitting in my car and I need to get into the office.
Let's wrap it up.
So as we round it out, do you feel that there is anything that we haven't covered that you would like to share with our listeners, whether it be a little bit of nugget of wisdom that you have picked up over time, or a little invitation for them to do something? Is there any sort of final words that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Just accept the idea, if you can. Just consider the idea to consent and agree that figuring this all out doesn't have to be really difficult. It doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to take a long time. Okay. Like what we're saying tonight, or the stuff that, George, and what you do for your clients, the way Bob Proctor, teaches, for example, it's all so simple and easy to understand. And the reason it's so simple and easy to understand is because it's true. And the truth always resonates with us. So if anything that, I've said or George has said tonight resonates with you, it's because it's true. That's why it resonates. And it just could be quite simply, that's it. You could take a couple of things that I said I think you might want to consider doing, or what George has said you might want to consider doing, and just accept the idea that it's just that simple. But our intellect, our upbringing, our education, our rules, values, all this mental junk it's got to be more complicated. It's not. It is quite simple. It is quite elegant. It operates in perfect order. Then you're perfect. You may not do perfect things, but you were created in God's image, and you are absolutely perfect. And lighten the hell up. That's what I would say. Lighten up, relax, and just let this work for you rather than trying to force life to be better.
I love that. Find joy in the journey, hey?
Yes.
Absolutely. How boring if you're not going to have a bit of fun along the way. So if people want to have some fun with you, Doug, how can they find you? Where can they reach you? If something you've said's resonated and they'd love to have a chat, coaching, or whatever it is that you offer, what's the best way to find you?
Well, a couple of ways. I mean, you can find me on obviously online on Facebook or YouTube, Doug Dane. I run my own show Thursday nights called The Turning Point. It's a live, sort of call-in show, and I do, sort of laser coaching around the spot with guests on the show and things like that. If you just Google Doug Dane, you will find me. Go to Facebook, go to YouTube, or go to DougDane.com, and you can find me. And reach out to me. Love to chat with you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been a delight to sit in your presence once again, to share space with you. It's been a long time, and I've totally enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Doug.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Today is turning into the most curious adventure I have ever had.